$41 trillion. Let that number sink in. It's not just the national debt, it's a ticking bomb larger than the economies of entire continents. In July, with a single stroke of a pen, Washington added $5 trillion more through something they called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Beautiful? No. Dangerous? Beyond measure. Here's the shock. Instead of the debt shooting upward, the official numbers fell. America's books suddenly looked cleaner, leaner, almost like the crisis had vanished. But you and I know, numbers don't just erase themselves. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. And here's the terrifying part. That vanishing act doesn't make the problem smaller, it makes it bigger. Because if $5 trillion can be quietly hidden today, what happens tomorrow when the cost comes due? When interest piles higher? When foreign creditors demand answers? When ordinary Americans start paying the invisible bill in ways no one voted for? This isn't just debt. This is America lighting the fuse on a bomb so large, no one knows how to stop the countdown. So let's break it down. How did America's debt leap past $41 trillion and yet fall at the same time? The answer begins with Washington's oldest trick, the debt ceiling. Every few years, Congress stages a high-drama battle over whether to raise the limit on how much the U.S. can legally borrow. This year's showdown ended with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, a flashy name masking the largest single increase ever, $5 trillion in new borrowing room. That should have sent the debt graph straight into the sky. But here's the twist. In September, the official U.S. Treasury dashboard listed the total national debt at about $37.5 trillion, lower than the ceiling, lower than the hype, lower than the headlines.
So what happened? Washington quietly shuffled obligations off the visible books. Certain trust funds, off-budget accounts, and delayed payments simply weren't counted in the top-line number. It's like moving credit card debt onto a different card. The balance looks lighter, but the burden hasn't changed. And this is where the illusion turns dangerous, because America's true obligations, Social Security, Medicare, defense contracts, pensions, interest, are not erased. They are merely deferred, hidden behind the curtain. Think about that. A government already owing over $30 trillion decides to add $5 trillion more. And then it reports back to you, the taxpayer, don't worry, it's actually less. Does that sound like fiscal discipline, or does it sound like a stage trick designed to buy time? This isn't the first time America has danced on the edge of a cliff. In the 1980s, President Reagan tripled the national debt through tax cuts and defense spending. In the 2000s, President George W. Bush nearly doubled it again with wars and tax cuts. Then came the 2008 financial crisis, followed by COVID-19 relief. Trillions printed, borrowed, and borrowed again. But never before has a $5 trillion jump happened in a single stroke. That's not a step, that's a detonation. And remember this, every time the debt ceiling has been raised, Washington promised it was temporary, manageable, safe. Yet, the curve of US debt tells a different story. It only moves one way, up. Maybe you're thinking, sure, trillions here, trillions there, but how does this hit me? The answer? Interest. Every dollar America borrows must be serviced with interest payments. Today, those payments already exceed the entire defense budget. And when you add $5 trillion more, those payments balloon further. That means fewer dollars for roads, schools, healthcare, and more dollars wired straight to creditors.
Who are those creditors? China, Japan, pension funds, Wall Street. In other words, money flowing outward while services at home shrink. And here's the kicker. When Washington hides debt, it doesn't erase the interest. It multiplies the risk. Because one day soon, the bill will resurface, bigger, uglier, impossible to ignore. Why would leaders hide debt instead of facing it? Because debt doesn't just fund programs, it funds politics. Every dollar borrowed today is a promise broken tomorrow, but tomorrow is another election cycle. That's why both parties play the same game. Democrats justify debt for social spending, Republicans for tax cuts and defense. Both sides rail against debt when out of power, then expand it once in power. So the illusion of falling debt isn't an accident, it's bipartisan survival. It lets politicians claim victory while the bomb ticks louder. And don't think the world isn't watching. China sees America's ballooning debt as a vulnerability.
Europe, Canada, and Australia calculate trade deals knowing Washington must borrow endlessly. The US dollar is still the world's reserve currency, but faith in its stability is slowly eroding. Imagine this: if foreign investors doubt America's ability to manage its debt, they demand higher interest rates to lend money. That drives up borrowing costs even further. Suddenly, the spiral tightens. Higher rates, higher payments, less money for citizens, more pressure on the system. It's a loop, and it's deadly. Think of it like this: you're driving a car at 90 miles per hour. You see it cliff ahead, but instead of slowing down, you press harder on the gas, then slap duct tape over the speedometer so it looks like you're safe. That's America's debt strategy.
The One Big Beautiful Bill Act wasn't beautiful. It was desperate. A move to buy time by shifting numbers instead of solving problems. And time, as every economist knows, is the one resource debt eventually takes away. That's where we stand. The fuse is lit, the bomb is ticking, and the official numbers are lying. But here's the bigger question: what happens next? The fuse is lit. The official numbers lie. Now let's ask the real question. What happens when the mask slips? When the hidden debt can no longer be hidden? Right now, the US Treasury tells you America's debt is roughly $37 trillion. But if you include unfunded promises, Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits, federal pensions, the true figure soars past $100 trillion. That's the iceberg beneath the surface, the part politicians never mention, because if they did, panic would spread instantly. And here's the trick: those obligations aren't counted in the official debt. They're off budget. But sooner or later, people retire, they claim benefits, doctors send bills, and suddenly the invisible debt turns painfully real. So when Washington adds $5 trillion more, you're not looking at debt in isolation. You're looking at the trigger for a much larger avalanche. Here's the next layer: interest rates. For decades, America's debt addiction looked manageable because interest rates were near zero. Borrow $1 trillion, pay almost nothing. Easy. But today, rates are climbing. That changes everything. Each new trillion doesn't just sit there, it bleeds money every second. Already, interest payments consume more than the Pentagon's entire defense budget. Imagine, America spends more just paying interest than defending its borders. Add $5 trillion, that burden explodes. More taxes, more inflation, less spending power for ordinary families.
Let's play it forward. Scenario 1. The inflation spiral. The US prints more money to service its debt. Prices surge. Your groceries, your gas, your rent all climb higher while wages stay flat. Scenario 2. The creditor revolt. Foreign governments like China and Japan decide America is too risky. They dump US bonds, demand higher yields, borrowing costs spike, the debt snowball grows. Scenario 3. The austerity trap. Washington finally admits the books are broken. Programs are slashed, taxes raised, benefits cut. Ordinary Americans suffer while politicians blame each other. Which scenario is most likely? Maybe all three. Different angles of the same storm. Now let's circle back to the illusion. Why did Washington make the debt appear to fall after raising the ceiling? Because perception matters more than reality. If Americans see the debt spike, they panic. Investors panic. Confidence collapses. So instead, the government hid the pain, kicking the can a few more months down the road. But here's the danger. Illusions break. When reality finally catches up, the shock will be greater than if it had been admitted up front. Think of Enron. Think of Lehman Brothers. Numbers looked fine until they didn't. Then the crash was 10 times worse.
That's where America stands today. Don't forget, the US isn't an island. The dollar is the world's reserve currency. Every country holds it. Every global trade route relies on it. If trust in US debt collapses, the ripple spreads everywhere. Europe feels it through higher energy costs. Canada feels it through exports. Asia feels it through currency shocks. Even allies like Australia and Britain, who depend on American financial stability, suddenly face their own crises. And rivals, China and Russia, they smile. They use America's debt addiction as proof the empire is hollow. They pitch alternatives, yuan-based trade, gold-backed currency blocks, hoping to chip away at the dollar's dominance. If they succeed, America doesn't just face a financial crisis, it faces the end of its global power. Now bring it home. What does all this mean for you? It means higher credit card rates, more expensive mortgages, shrinking retirement savings as markets wobble. It means government checks, Social Security, Medicare at risk of delays or cuts. It means jobs tied to federal contracts disappearing overnight when budgets seize up. And worst of all, it means a creeping loss of faith. Faith that America will always pay its bills. Faith that your savings are secure. Faith that tomorrow will be better than today. Because once trust cracks, economies crumble faster than anyone expects. Some experts say yes. Raise taxes on the wealthy, cut defense spending, reform entitlements, balance the budget.
But here's the harsh truth. Every solution is politically impossible. Raise taxes and half the country revolts. Cut Social Security and millions riot. Slash defense and America looks weak abroad. No politician wants to touch that. So instead, they choose the easy way. Borrow more, hide more, pretend more, until the pretending stops working. So where does this leave us? With a $41 trillion debt bomb that didn't explode upward, it sank downward into the shadows. But the fuse is still burning. And when it goes off, it won't just be numbers on a screen. It will be jobs lost, bills unpaid, futures rewritten. You've heard the phrase, too big to fail. America's debt is now too big to save. And that's the truth no one in Washington will say out loud. America just staged the greatest vanishing act in financial history. $5 trillion added, yet the debt appeared to shrink. A trick worthy of a magician. But in the real world, tricks don't last. The question is not if the reckoning comes. The question is when. And when it does, the fallout won't be confined to Washington. It will hit you, me, every American family, every global market. $41 trillion. A bomb no one can defuse. A countdown no one can stop. And the final question remains. When the smoke clears, who will still be standing?